One of the more annoying ways that people defend capitalism is when you challenge one of their views. They simply ignore you and restate their position as if restating their position is all that's needed in order to prove anything. Now, of course, this is not limited simply to discussing capitalism. This could be related to discussing anything from politics to educational models to religion to you name it. When someone really doesn't have an answer for a problem to their paradigm, they will very often just ignore problems and just restate their original position. And I'm going to go over one example of this right here in this dialogue I'm having with someone called Peter Wilson. And our little argument was over the fact that in a capitalistic society, the only way for the working people to get the necessities of life is to buy them in the market. And the only way to do this is to sell their labor for a wage. Now, Peter Wilson disagrees with this. He believes there are other ways under capitalism for people to get the necessities of life. So I asked him to give some examples. And he starts listing one example after another that is not part of capitalism. For example, he lists permaculture homestead. Now, if you are on a permaculture homestead and you are self-sufficient, and then you are not engaging in the capitalistic system, well, then how does this prove that there is another way to get stuff under capitalism if you have to be out of capitalism to have your permaculture homestead and be completely self-sufficient? The only place where capitalism comes into this permaculture homestead is that you need to first sell your labor to get money in order to buy the property in which to have your permaculture homestead on. But once you have your little self-sufficient permaculture homestead, you are not participating in the capitalistic mode of production. Eco-villages, it's the same thing. If you have a self-sufficient eco-village, you are not participating in the capitalistic mode of production. He goes so far as to claim that a tribal culture model is somehow engaging in free market capitalism. Tribal culture models have been around for tens of thousands of years, predating the capitalistic mode of production. Again, because if you are in this tribal culture, you are not in capitalism. And he just repeats this over and over again in different posts. He even goes so far as to say zeitgeist models minus coercive rulers, please. So he's basically saying a resource-based economy is an example where you don't have to exchange your labor for wages under capitalism. This makes no sense. A zeitgeist model, what it really means is a resource-based economy model, is one that uses resources as the economic basis and objective human needs, not money. It is outside of the capitalistic mode of production. By the way, coercive rulers are nowhere stated in any zeitgeist model. He goes on, he lists alternative money systems. This shows a fundamental lack of understanding of what capitalism is. Using your own different alternative money system to the US dollar or something, that's not changing anything fundamental about the capitalistic mode of production. You're still in it. You would still have to exchange your labor for the wages in this alternative money system. Barter bucks, hour for hour exchanges. That's kind of like besides the point. He's trying to come up with like little primitive examples. If you're not actually producing some commodity for the sake of exchanging that product for profit, you're outside of the capitalistic mode of production. He then lists religious communities and spiritual communities. I don't see what religion has to do with this. One could be in a very religious community and still engage in the capitalistic mode of production, unless he's referring to something like a bunch of monks living out in the woods being completely self-sufficient. Well, in that case, those monks are not taking part in the capitalistic mode of production. So in order for him to show that you do not need to sell your labor for wages under capitalism, he then has to go ahead and use all sorts of examples that have nothing to do with capitalism. But when this is pointed out to him, he just restates his position. A couple of days later, we're going to show how far a free market libertarian can take just restating his opinion over and over again without addressing anything. We're going to go over a quote by Thorstein Veblen. I pointed to him on YouTube, and then we're going to look at his response.
Economist Thorstein Veblen, and a brilliant sociologist, perhaps my favorite social critic, also rejected the idea of private property and that it was a natural right, often expressing the absurdity of thought again that leads what he called absentee owners, the owners that don't do anything, to claim ownership of commodities produced in reality by the manual labor of others, highlighting again the irrationality of the long-held principle that from labor comes property. However, Veblen went farther, and he expressed something much more profound than everything I just talked about. He expresses the social nature of production and how the skills and knowledge accumulation inherent completely voids the causal justification of property rights in and of themselves, stating, "The natural rights theory of property makes the creative effort of an isolated, self-sufficing individual the basis of ownership vested in him. In doing so, it overlooks the fact that there is no isolated, self-sufficing individual. Production takes place only in society, only through the cooperation of an industrial community. This industrial community may be large or small, but it always comprises a group large enough to contain and transmit the traditions, tools, technical knowledge, and usages without which there can be no industrial organization and no economic relation of individuals to one another or to their environment. There can be no production without technical knowledge, hence no accumulation and no wealth to be owned. And there is no technical knowledge apart from the industrial community. Since there is no individual production and no individual productivity, the natural rights preconception reduces itself to absurdity, even under the logic of its own assumptions." Think about it. How can we create anything of ownership in a physical or intellectual sense and be isolated? And how can we source anything to a single individual or select group? Veblen recognized basically that we live in a group mind. We live in a shared concept, whether we like it or not, and we share our ideas and skills. And you know, this rhetoric today we hear, it's very common in the right, in the conservative circles. You get what you work for. In this ethic, your contribution is the only thing that can manifest and improve life. Yet, did anyone in this room invent the automobile? Yes, we might have to pay for it at this time, but the general intellectual design and the hence thousands of years of scientific inquiry and awareness that manifest that piece of technology was given to us, given to our generation for free, along with countless other inherited lifestyle realities we take for granted. While our intuition and basic interest in our own well-being seems to support, again, this justification of property, whether physical or intellectual, the whole thing falls apart very rapidly when we take the perspective of social, intellectual development.
Now, notice Peter Wilson is mentioning this phrase of legitimate property rights. Thorstein Veblen here is directly attacking Peter Wilson's notion of legitimate property rights. Yet Peter Wilson has no reply to it. The only thing he could possibly say is, it's the state, get rid of the state. But it's a complete non sequitur. Peter Wilson continues, such generalizing certainly confuses the issue. He is condemning statist intervention economics, not free market. This quote has nothing to do with state interventions. It's attacking, again, this root idea that you are creating something on your own in the industrialized world. Peter Wilson then continues. No one can rightly assert ownership of traditions or technical knowledge without violating others' basic human rights. This is Peter Wilson's personal ideas on basic human rights. It is subjective theories based upon what sounds good to him. There's no real empirical basis to this, whatsoever. So he's basically saying we can't have any patent laws. We can't have any, intellectual property. which is really beside the point because the whole quote is actually discussing production. And I'm not even aware anyway, within libertarian circles, if people object to intellectual property. Uh, Whatever, let's go on. So then Peter Wilson finishes up. So it's not an argument against a truly free market. And this is the repetitive line they keep on saying, in a true free market, without referencing anything. Can anyone actually point to the specific line and the specific concept that Thorsten Veblen is thinking about here that is somehow contradicted or negated when you introduce the true free market? Remember, everything Peter Wilson is saying is based upon the notion of legitimate property rights because you are doing it on your own. Thorsten Veblen is showing how in industrialized capitalism you cannot do anything on your own. And Peter Wilson's comeback is in a true free market. And it really sounds repetitive, but what does this have to do with government? I don't understand. To me, it seems to be a direct attack against certain libertarian notions, which kind of makes sense if we go back to before the Industrial Revolution, when we did have individual craftsmen. You can kind of say we seem to be doing things on their own. But once you start introducing industrialization and the socialization of labor, it's pretty hard to say anyone is doing anything on their own. And then continuing in further discussion, Peter Wilson continues to believe that just restating an opinion without countering anything said against it is somehow proof that his original idea is correct. Here, I am pointing out that the game of capitalism itself gives incentive to corrupt behavior independent of government. And then he goes on and he mentions his experience opening a business with his wife. He's basically saying we can abstract away all emergent consequences of this game of capitalism because of my business with my wife. You know, and it doesn't matter how many times you point out to him that he's taking a simple and truncated example which kind of seems to work from one perspective, but it really does not address the general tendencies. Peter keeps on believing that everything you need to know about the system of capitalism can be seen in his business with his wife. That now he's saying that this general tendency in capitalism for corruption as people try to do whatever they can to get differential advantage over other businesses. The only thing he has to do to show that capitalism isn't going to lead to corruption is show one example. If there are general trends, then of course there are going to be exceptions to those general trends, showing one example where the general trend does not follow, that doesn't prove anything. That's like saying baseball players taking steroids doesn't lead to them hitting more home runs because here's one baseball player who shot with lots of steroids and didn't hit more home runs. So that's kind of what he's saying here. He's basically saying that because he did not engage in corrupt behavior with his wife in their business, that capitalism does not inevitably lead to corruption. The ironic thing is that if you actually look at the real world, you see corruption in just about every single sector. Whether it's finance or healthcare or whatever. I don't need to go into all of it. We're living in a world where everything is corrupt because people are trying to fight to get more market share under capitalism, and he's arguing that this corruption doesn't exist. Or then when it's there, he just claims it's because of the government. The government is besides the point. It's the system itself of capitalism that generates the conditions where people have to do what they can to get more money. That has nothing to do with government. That's not going to change if you can have your theoretical free market utopia. And then when we have the issue of technological unemployment brought up, he says at the end, technological unemployment makes no sense when entrepreneurship is permitted. In other words, he's saying in a true free market, you don't have technological unemployment. Well, what does one have to do with the other? If you have mechanization taking away jobs, what does entrepreneurship have to do with it? The only way entrepreneurship can create jobs is if there is some need for labor somewhere. If you are removing the need for labor and automizing production, why do you need all these jobs? And when you say technological unemployment makes no sense, you're implying that we are going to continue to need everyone working full-time jobs regardless of technology. Where is the empirical basis for that? Where is your real-world reference? You can't. This is a faith-based declaration that you believe that the world is as it is, and you don't need reference to reality. There's a video, Awakening, by Douglas Millett, and he shows very concretely how there is a trend in every industry where it get to a point where where employment starts to go down and production just goes up. It's an irreversible trend in every field. Peter Wilson has no real answer to technological unemployment, so we get this faith-based declaration. Are you aware of developing technologies where they will be able to just print out homes, so you don't need construction workers making homes because they can print it out? They'll be able to print out cars. There will be home 3D printers. So this idea that if you need something like a screwdriver or a pencil, you're going to go out and buy one, that's going to start to become obsolete in the future. Where are these jobs? Douglas Millett is working on this project, Cybernated Farm Systems. It's a food factory. You have a building that's basically uses aquaponics and other systems to auto-generate its own food without human labor involved. When you start putting these systems in place, why do you believe there's going to be a need for all this human labor? You can't just dismiss technological unemployment because you don't like it, because it doesn't fit in with your paradigm. And what does government have to do with this? What does corporations and government coercion have to do with technological unemployment? I don't. Technology is taking away the need for all this human labor, which would be a good thing, except that we have an economic system that demands lots of human labor. Now, Peter Wilson, again, you're saying that technological unemployment does not exist. It does not matter how much technology we ever have. The technology is never going to displace any workers. Just absurdity. Go back to the Middle Ages. You're not going to find any employed people because we needed the labor. And this is the final point, that no matter what you say to free market libertarians, they just repeat over and over again their same talking points, no matter how absurd. And what it all comes down to is they just say, blame the government, and it wouldn't be this way in a true free market. You don't have to refer to the physical world. And by the way, here's my little reductionistic example. So we can abstract away any aspect of capitalism that doesn't fit into my worldview, because I'm going to cherry pick my little simplified and truncated example so we don't have to worry about complications with my paradigm. And that's what these free market libertarians do. Okay, bye.